Hi guys, this is my second video on project context. Today I'm going to talk about SOFT and SWOT. This is a way of analysing your project and how good it is basically. It can be used in conjunction with PESTLE, and I'll link above to my video on project context and PESTLE. So, SOFT and SWOT. I'm going to talk about both because I've seen both used, but they're very similar, and I slightly prefer each one in different circumstances. I think SWOT is slightly better when you're talking about yourself because it makes you feel better about yourself, whereas SOFT sometimes is better for projects. Also, SWOT is better when you're looking forward looking rather than backward looking, stuff like that, but I'll explain in a second. So the four letters are S for successes, F for failures, O for opportunities, and T for threats.
As you can see, you can turn successes and failures into strengths and weaknesses. It's whichever one you prefer.
So you have strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats, instead of successes, failures, opportunities and threats. So you can choose which one you use. So when you're talking about yourself, successes and failures sometimes feels a bit to talk about how you failed. Ugh. Sometimes actually it's something you want to look at. When you're looking backwards, you want to sit there and go, yeah, I failed at that. And whether that's a project or personal, it depends on what your viewpoint is. Then you have strengths and weaknesses. It's just a slightly softer way of saying successes and failures. Weaknesses aren't you failed, it's that you were a bit weak in an area and you need to work on it. So it all depends on the terminology you want to use. Strengths and successes, they are the things that have gone well, that have already gone well, and that you can show off about and go, hey, I did this thing. Failures and weaknesses are the things which have not gone well, that have already not gone well, and that you need to look at fixing. And that may be that you need to fix it because something's gone terribly wrong, or it may be that it just didn't go so well. Then we get onto the second half of our SWOT or SOFT. Opportunities and threats. Now these are very similar things, and if you're used to doing risk management in project management, you'll understand this quite well. They are things which have not happened yet, but you're hoping will or are hoping won't. You need to do mitigations against them if they're threats, to try and stop them happening because you know they might happen, and if they're opportunities, you need to try and exploit them. So an example of a threat is that a bug's going round and people are getting sick. You want to try and make sure your staff don't get sick, so you email everyone asking them to wash their hands. Opportunities are again things which may or may not happen. You can't predict that they'll definitely happen. Otherwise they won't be opportunities, they'll be successes. An example of an opportunity is when you've found an efficiency but you're not certain you'll be able to do it. When, if you're running a conference, somebody comes up and says they have a connection with someone famous and might be able to get them to help, but they're still looking into it. Opportunities and threats are really the area of a SWOT that you need to look at, because when something's a success or a failure, they're definitely going to happen. There's no reason to kind of concentrate them in some ways, they've happened. Yes, with failures, you really want to make sure that they don't happen again and that you've fixed any problems. And with successes, you want to make sure that you sort of celebrate the successes. But with threats and opportunities, that's where some careful project management is needed. That's where you become the next level project manager, is when you exploit the opportunities and avoid the threats. So how does this apply to the project context? So I've kind of been talking it very much in a day-to-day project management way, but also when you're looking at your project context, you can go through the PESTLE and in each area look at a SWOT of how your project is in that area. So if we very quickly look at running an event in London and running an event in the middle of the countryside. The successes, you find a very good venue that's easily accessible in London, but then in the countryside you may find a beautiful venue that's not very accessible but is cheap. Failures, London is going to be expensive. You may find that politically you've gone somewhere that people don't want to go because it has a history. You may actually find that running a conference out in the sticks is not a good idea. But then you have the opportunity to bring in different people who don't usually come into London. So you've got to exploit that opportunity, make sure you're advertising to the right people. Again, in London, you have the opportunity to charge more money. You have the opportunity to bring in London people who, I don't know, are cool. Then you also have threats. If you're doing a conference in London, there may be other conferences nearby which are going to threaten your conference because people will want to go to that one, not your one. Whereas in the sticks, you may have threats that a sheep runs into the conference room. I'm looking at this from both a high level and a low level scale here. So when you're doing this sort of analysis, sometimes you want to concentrate on the high level successes, risks, and things like that, and sometimes you want to concentrate on the lower ones. Right at the beginning of a project, really you want to concentrate on the high level stuff, like competing conferences, like making sure the venue's okay. Whereas once you get into the project, you want to do stuff like making sure there's no sheep, which I'm regretting choosing as an example. So, what do you think of my description of SOFT and SWOT? It's been a bit of a ramble, but hopefully you understand how it can be used, and it's quite a versatile tool. It's really just a leaping board for you to think about your project. It's not actually a sort of black and white reporting structure to do, but I worked on projects where you have to do one every month. I've worked in jobs where we have to do one on ourselves every month, so it's a useful thing. Or is it not? Let me know in the comments. Let me know if you like this video. Do press a like, do press subscribe, and goodbye.